morning, everybody. It's dark. It's cold. I want to put my hood up because it's really cold outside. I had a difficult time getting up this morning. So, hello. Today is July 28th, and I want to welcome you to Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins. Every weekday, you're going to find me here telling you about what happened yesterday in the world of cloud native and open source. I mean, there's tons of stuff that happens. There's so much going on, it's impossible to keep track of it all. So I want this show to be the place where you can learn about what's happening with the software and the solutions that we already use, and as an opportunity for all of us to discover new things that we've never heard of. Last night I was putting the show together, and I ended up with way more stuff than I probably have time to talk about, so I don't want to run over like I did yesterday. Let's just get right into it. Do you know about Mattermost? Mattermost is an open source alternative to Slack. It's unfortunate that Slack has become the de facto definition of what is actually just IRC. But props to Slack for figuring out a few years ago that if you put a really nice GUI on IRC, people will pay you money for it. And then, of course, Slack has gone much further with the bots and the whole API and stuff like that. But anyway, lots of places can't or won't run Slack servers because Slack is it's essentially a SaaS. So you're sending all your stuff out to them. So it's not appropriate for people who actually care about the security of their information, a la governments or people like myself. I actually run a Mattermost server for friends of mine who used to all hang out on IRC. And yesterday, Mattermost released the 1.6 version of their Kubernetes operator. So Mattermost is super easy to get started, even just on your own. In fact, I started building my own container image for it a few years ago, but at some point I'll probably switch to using their operator version. All you really need is a database, something for object storage, and the server itself, and the operator takes care of setting all of those things up. On the Mattermost main page, they've got fantastic documentation that includes detailed information about how to install it on Kubernetes, everything that you need to get up and running. If you haven't checked it out and you're interested in having a chat server either for your work or if you can get people, it's really hard to get people away from Slack once they've got their hooks in them. But if you're looking to set something up that's new, Mattermost is a wonderful way to go. Another one that's out there that's also really cool is Zulip. I tried to get people to use Zulip, and we ended up just going back to Mattermost. But if you use Slack or any of these things, you've probably run into the problem that you just have this endless chain of direct messages because channels are difficult to keep track of subjects when everything's kind of bunched together and it just rolls off the top of the list or off the top of the screen. So Zulip assigns topics to conversations and things become threaded. So even within a channel, you can find what the conversations were and go back and follow them. It's a pretty cool idea. It's really only possible if you're just starting out, but it's also worth taking a look. That sentence was totally lame. It's worth taking a look at Zulip if you're just starting out, figuring out what you want to do for a chat server. See, the internet is being wonderful today. We don't have anyone in the chat. Oh, actually, we do. Hey, Haim, thanks for joining. I'm doing something different today with my audio that I forgot to tell you about. I have a dynamics processor on there to try and filter out the background white noise that comes from the river that's right over there. So let me know if, my audio starts cutting out or something like that on the low end, because when I stop talking, it's just going to go silent. Like that. Hopefully that is more. Anyway, let me know in the chat if there's an issue and, whatever. I'll tweak it. Moving on. Porter. Porter. If you know anything about me or my videos, you know that I'm a huge fan of MetalLB. And in my MetalLB videos, I always say that MetalLB is the only solution for load balancer services on Kubernetes in bare metal. Apparently that's not true. Apparently there's another thing out there called Porter that strives to do the same kind of thing. It was added to the CNCF landscape a couple of weeks ago. I was actually going to talk about it a couple of days ago, but I wasn't sure. And when compared to MetalLB, it's just not quite as mature. And in fact, if you look at their GitHub repo, it's not. They need some attention. But I wanted to bring it up because if you're working with BGP, this apparently has better compatibility with Calico. Calico is the CNI that uses BGP for Kubernetes communication. But what it doesn't have is, well, okay, so either of them will work with Layer 2 or BGP. This one allegedly has better compatibility with Calico. Metal LB will work in non-bare metal cloud provider environments if they support the things that Metal LB needs. So I only bring it up to say that there is something else out there. If for some reason you worked with Metal LB and it didn't work out for you, but you still want load balancer solution for bare metal, then well, you can check out Porter, and perhaps that will work for you. The fact that it got added to the CNCF landscape is significant in that it's just a nod to their open source and their community-focused development practices. This one's kind of cool. VMware, if you have an account with VMware already, which I don't, so I didn't actually log in to set this up, but they're giving away 6 months of their premium training access. So you can just go to purchase, and it won't actually charge you anything, and you get access to 65 self-paced training titles, 1,300 technical videos, 650 exam prep videos. So if you use VMware services, I mean, free is a pretty good price, right? If you use their services, ooh, my audio is crisp. That's nice. That window where I have the chat is actually rather small, and I thought it said my audio is crap. But crisp, we'll take crisp over that. So free is a great price. If you use VMware services, or if you want to learn more about stuff that you can do with vSphere or anything like that, I mean, just sign up for this, because why the heck not, and see what you can get. Now, every day, something, security. Security is important, and it's something that I'm going to keep talking about, but I also want to present it in a way that doesn't complicate your life. We want these things to be easy. We want them to be easy to do. We want them to be stuff that we can just build into our workflows so that we continue to do them. There is a really nice walkthrough. Good morning, coffee. There is a really nice walkthrough on securing Amazon EKS workloads with Bitbucket and Sneak. A little congested today because of the cold. I actually have a hot water bottle tucked in under my hoodie down here to keep me warm because I turned the heater off so I don't suffocate. So this article walks through setting up a software delivery pipeline with Bitbucket and then hooking it into Sneak and using that to deploy stuff into EKS. Sneak is a tool that finds and fixes vulnerabilities in open source dependencies and container images. I actually have them over here. And they have an open source product. Of course, they have a paid solution, but they will secure and remediate issues inside of your workloads. The article talks about shift left security, and I really hate buzzwords, but they do a nice job of painting what that means. And basically all it means is you want to get security issues resolved before they end up out in production where they could be exploited. So that means that you got to move it down into the developer side of things. Developers develop. Like all this operations stuff that we're throwing onto them is just extra work and extra cognitive load. So any tool that we can give developers that helps them bake security into their processes without extra energy being wasted in trying to figure this stuff out is helpful. So Bitbucket walks through how to hook into Sneak or other tools. They actually have McAfee, Synopsys, and Anchor as other solutions. And then a whole walkthrough on exactly how to set all of this stuff up. If you use Bitbucket, look at Sneak. If you use EKS, I mean, this would work with any other Kubernetes distribution or deployment or service or whatever as well. This is a nice walkthrough to get you up and running. We have more security stuff that we're going to be talking about today. There are changes coming to the CKA. If you are currently training for CKA, taking classes, the main thing is that it's going to support Kubernetes 1.19. There's also some modification to the percentages and what's covered in each of the areas. I'll have this page, along with everything else, linked in the description, the video description at the end of the show. So you can look at this. Basically, all it means is if you're training right now, either take the test before September 1st, or make sure that whatever training you're doing incorporates all of the stuff that's going to be in the test after September 1st. You don't want to do all this training and take the test on September 2nd and fail because there's a whole bunch of things you didn't know you needed to do. So this is important news. KubeCon. KubeCon's virtual this year, obviously, right? Everything is virtual this year. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation does tremendous things that all of us benefit from, and they make a significant portion of their revenue each year. I mean, they're a foundation, but they still need money to do what they do. So they make a significant portion of their revenue on events, and they've been hit by all of the stuff that's hit everybody else because there's no in-person events. I mean, they had to cancel KubeCon, North America earlier this year because, well, actually, that's not true. They were going to do KubeCon. Oh, no, I don't remember. Anyway, they've been hit. I guess it was KubeCon Europe. It was in Amsterdam. And they rescheduled it to this, and so now it's virtual. They were hoping they could get it to be main events or to be in person, but they couldn't. So anyway, if you can sign up and go, please sign up and go. It's not very expensive, and they have a lot of stuff planned, and they've done a really good job of trying to make it as engaging and interactive as possible. So basically, they're going to have presentations on service mesh, storage. They're going to have tutorials. They're going to have information on culture. This article is just a quick overview about the kinds of things that they're going to have. They've got keynotes. They've got all of the stuff. And even though it's virtual, you'll still be able to navigate around and go booth to booth. Rancher's going to be there. I've been helping Rancher put together some videos for their stuff. They'll have demos. Everybody's going to have demos, engineers that you can talk to. And we need to support the CNCF because they support us. So if you can go, please go. Service mesh. Istio is like the big dog. Everybody knows, or the big elephant. Everybody knows about Istio. There's also lots of other service meshes out there. There's Linkerd, there's Mesh, well, let's talk about Consul. If you're interested in Consul, if you like what HashiCorp does, if you want to keep consistency in if you're already using other HashiCorp solutions, the problem with a lot of this stuff is it's hard to get up to speed and try it out without investing a lot of time in it. None of us want to invest time learning about and setting something up just to see if it's going to work for us, just to throw it all away. So I really like detailed, in-depth tutorials and walkthroughs that get you not just up and running, but up and running with some basic knowledge of why you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And this page is not only a video from Jacob Mamoliti. Sorry, Jacob. It's not only a video from Jacob, but it's also a full transcript of everything he says in the video. So if you don't want to watch the video, you can follow along with the transcript. I frequently get people who ask me if I have transcripts for my videos because I speak very quickly, and for people, particularly people for whom English is not their first language, it can be challenging. I'm looking at the chat. It can be challenging to follow along in just a video. Jamo just says that Consul Enterprise is $55,000 to mesh 20 nodes. Okay. That's a lot of money, but that's not necessarily a reason to not talk about them. I mean, Rancher, even though it's also open source and you don't need to pay for anything at all, also costs money if you want support for it. A lot of places still want to look at the solutions that are available. So if you're interested in Consul, we'll have this linked in the show description, and it's a huge, huge article on getting up and running with them. Jama says that they need to come down in price. I'm just here to talk about what's available and what's new and what's out there. So let's take a look at the chat really quick. Farid is here. Hello. John's here. Hi, John. Reed says, Adrian, can you please talk about logging in Rancher? I use logging project. I need to use regular expressions on Fluentd site. Can you please talk about that or give tutorials? Sure. I will make a note to see if we can get you some information on logging in Rancher. I'm writing this down with Fluentd. Logs filter regular expression. Thanks a lot. And Java says console's good for community. I mean, you can run console open source. Obviously, I'm sure that there are features that are missing that are available in the enterprise version. I personally, I run a lot of this stuff in my labs. I run it in my production environment that I run out in DigitalOcean. I don't run any of this stuff for Rancher. Rancher runs all of there's other people who choose what Rancher runs for the services that Rancher uses. So I'm personally interested in things that don't cost any money at all. Or things where you can start for no money and then decide if you want to pay money later. My experience with HashiCorp has always been that their open source solutions are solid for the base level of things that you need to do. And when you outgrow that, you're probably in a position where you work for an organization that has money, and that's part of why you need that feature or solution. I'm probably not going to pay $55,000 to run console enterprise in my house. All right. I'm getting more questions in the chat. Let's go through the other stuff that I have for today, and we'll try and circle back and answer some of those questions. Yesterday I talked about using a new kubectl debug. Jerome Peta. Today's the day of butchering people's last names. Jerome Petazzoni, had a video on using ephemeral containers to debug stuff. Today, I want to show you that the Kubernetes documentation, like we often think of documentation as just here's the basic thing on how to use stuff. And we've all seen documentation where you're like, oh, what does this field mean? And then you go to the documentation and it just basically tells you that this field is used for whatever the title of the field is. And that's not helpful. On the flip side of that, you have something like the documentation that's available on Kubernetes, which gives you not just how to use Kubernetes, but really thorough information on why and how and what when you encounter problems. They have a whole section on debugging. Today I'm just highlighting the page on debugging services, but it's not just do this to figure it out. It's here's a series of troubleshooting steps that will narrow down the problem from I'm not sure where it is to it's probably over here, and then you can continue with trying to resolve the issue in that specific area. And it ends with if you've done all of these troubleshooting steps and your service still isn't working, then there's something clearly wrong that's not just operator error or a configuration error, in which case come to the Slack and we'll help you out. Remember that these pages exist and use them as a resource when you're trying to figure things out. The other thing that I like to remind people of is that none of this is magic. Like Kubernetes simply virtualizes or uses principles similar to software-defined networking. It just softwareizes things that we've always done in hardware. I know softwareize isn't a word. Start using it because it works. If you have a physical load balancer and some physical servers, and they're running physical applications on them, not inside of containers or anything, and there's a problem, well, you know how to fix it. You know how to get on the server, you know how to troubleshoot it, you know how to check server to server. That's all you need to do with Kubernetes is say, if this was real infrastructure, how would I troubleshoot this problem? And then begin troubleshooting those components within the cluster. I helped somebody with this the other day where he was getting weird intermittent errors, and I showed him just shell into every single pod that, like, set up a daemon set. So there's one pod on every node, and then shell into every pod and run the same series of tests using both curl and ping to make sure that each pod can reach the services that would be generating that error. And sure enough, he found one node with some networking issue where anything that got scheduled to that node wasn't actually able to communicate back. It's not magic. Just break it down into its simple components and figure out how to troubleshoot those components. You'll find the problem, and then you can fix the problem. What else do they have in here? They've got debugging services, they've got debugging stateful sets, init containers, pods and replication controllers. running pods, debugging nodes with cryctl. There's a bunch of resources just in the troubleshooting section on this particular page, and they're always updating their documentation. So just yesterday, I gave you an introduction to the Cluster API, and it was this huge page that was possibly a little bit confusing or daunting for some of you. So if you looked at that yesterday and you were like, whoa, I don't understand any of this, and you ran away from it, that's cool. I have another page today. It's a week and something old. It's 2 weeks old, but it's a gentle introduction into the Cluster API, written by a gentleman who works at Packet, and specifically about what Packet is doing to use the Cluster API to deploy services. And he describes it pretty succinctly, where he says you can basically think of it as, it's a kubectl apply for clusters. So instead of kubectl apply and you get a pod, you kubectl apply and you get a cluster. And then he gives a little bit more explanation of it without really going into detail about how to get started using it. If you just want to know about it, there's a resource for you there. Oh, I love pop-ups. I love windows that are like, hey, I know you're reading my article, but don't you want to subscribe? Do you want to subscribe? No. Hey, you moved the mouse off of the page. Do you want to subscribe? Moving on to security, zero trust is a term that you're going to hear a lot more of in coming months, whether you do stuff with the government or not. Zero trust is the idea that our systems are constantly in a hostile environment and cannot trust anything that tries to communicate with them. So you can't trust based on IP address, host name, anything other than a verifiable identity credential of some kind. This incorporates things like mutual TLS, identities for processes and services and applications, and a default deny for all communication. This is important for governments for obvious reasons, but it's going to move into everything else. Service meshes already incorporate some of this functionality, and as you start using the technology that has zero trust components built into it, you're probably going to be rolling this stuff out. If you aren't, for example, I'm not going to roll out zero trust in my house, it's still worth understanding what it is so that you can speak intelligently about it and work in an environment or propose it for customers or your employer where it's appropriate to do so. This article gives you an introduction into what zero trust is, how to get started using zero trust methodologies, and how to start thinking about zero trust and building it into your architectures. And since it comes from a government perspective, it's pretty serious. And on the flip side of zero trust, if we are going to talk about how important it is to secure your stuff, well, let's also talk about how important it is to know what you're securing against. AppSec has released their training and labs for you to play with. So if you want to learn how to attack and audit and compromise your own Kubernetes clusters, there you go. So the README is actually pretty sparse, but it talks about how to generate the actual instruction material. And if you look in their source here, you'll see that they have a lot of information, including scenarios on how to do all of this stuff. So you've got slides, scenarios, labs, everything is available for free. Thank you very much, AppSec. That's a pretty plane, right? That's a B-1. You're like, Adrian, why are you showing us military aircraft on the national interest? Because this is an article about this upcoming B-21 stealth bomber that the United States is building, which I hadn't even heard of, because, you get the B-1 and the B-2. So what do you get? You get the B-21, because why the heck not? But if you read this article, it's talking about, the stealth development of it and so on and so forth. And then in the middle of the article, they start talking about containers and Kubernetes. This isn't like on Tech Journal or IT Next or something. This is, or Container Journal, or whatever. Seeing this, like, I mean, this is amazing. This clearly says that what we're doing is real. Like, nobody can say anymore that Kubernetes is a fad or Kubernetes isn't here to stay. It's here to stay. And all of us need to continue to develop our skills with it. And Jamo, all of the links to everything will be in the video description about a half an hour after the show ends. So you'll be able to come back and take a look at all of this. Yeah, I saw this and I was like, wow, this is crazy. So they have this quote here that they say, so by drawing upon software-enabled virtualization, systems can upgrade faster, reduce their hardware footprint, and better employ automation, AI, and machine learning applications. In all-out warfare terms, this means that B-21 pilots can share information and find and destroy targets such as enemy air defenses much faster. So they're talking about integrating communication between ground forces and air forces, building stuff off of Kubernetes. I mean, I already know for a fact that there are Kubernetes deployments inside of F-16s. It just blows my mind how fast all of this is moving and how pervasive it's going to be. If you do go to KubeCon, our keynote is about using Fleet for managing cluster sprawl. And we start talking about Rancher's ability to manage thousands or tens of thousands or up to million clusters. And people are like, who would ever need to manage a million clusters? No, Keith Basil, who's giving the keynote, explains how you can, in a fraction of a second, understand why a company might have tens and hundreds of thousands of clusters. And you start thinking about things like this, like Kubernetes, it's going to be everywhere. I'm running out of time again. I have two more things. Yes, so Ceph. Anytime you talk about cloud native storage, RookSeth comes up. Ceph is fantastic software. It's a great storage engine, but you need to run it on dedicated hardware. And if I'm going to run storage on dedicated hardware, then I ask myself, why do I need to put Kubernetes on top of that? Why does it need to be dedicated hardware in a Kubernetes cluster if that doesn't provide me some significant benefit? From what I've seen in my deployments, it doesn't. Ceph is also a beast. You need to have Ceph skills to deal with it when it goes sideways. And it's a great solution, but it might not be the solution that you need. So consider, if you want stuff in Kubernetes, consider other container-attached storage solutions like Longhorn. But if you want to go play with RookSeth and you want to get up and running quickly to get an understanding of whether it's something that you should use, just like the article I gave you earlier, this one will get you up to speed, and you can make those decisions quickly. And the last article that I want to show you today actually has nothing to do with cloud native, but you hear me talk about my internet as I've got this like window open over here where I keep watching my provider be what they are, and I keep having to adjust my stream rate, but oh yeah, so you've got whatever. In Germany, they've got over half the country up on 5G now, and they're on their way to 2/3. And this is an article from yesterday, and they talk about how, where's their speed? Rural areas, so I'm like in the middle of a rural area, are getting 225 megabits per second. That's insanity. I went to my wife last night when I saw this, and I was like, okay, we're totally moving to Germany. Which is not actually true, but I hope that Chile gets 5G. They'll probably get it in 10 years. Today's tool of the day is a tool called Kubebox. Kubebox can run either inside of a Kubernetes cluster, and you can connect to it directly, or you can run it locally on your machine, and it gives you a nice, cool, curses-based interface to look at pods, their logs, and if you have the cAdvisor pod running inside the cluster, you can also get metrics. You can install it locally, and you'll see it does cool stuff, like you can select the pod that you want to look at, and I don't have the cAdvisor pod up and running, so you're not going to get the metrics, but it shows you log data, and it'll actually stream the logs. It's helpful if you have it on a window with slightly better resolution, so it doesn't wrap quite as much. but this is a really cool way to, you can switch namespaces, you can switch clusters, you can log into arbitrary clusters even if they're not in your kubectl config file. And and occasionally it throws errors. That's exciting. Let's just close that. That's probably related to not having the CAdvisor pod actually in there. So that's today's tool of the day. I've used KubeBox for years. It's nice just to have it to just scroll through and you can get logs from multiple things. That is it for today. I'm gonna quickly check the logs. I'm gonna quickly check the chat over here and see what we've got. All right, Ariel is asking questions about Rancher supporting sending logs to Loki. Not directly, but if Loki speaks syslog, then sure. The syslog endpoint within Rancher is designed for everything else. So if you want to send it to Graylog or anything else, pretty much everything speaks syslog. Logstash, all of that stuff. And Farid says Longhorn is the best. Thanks, Farid. Okay, so that's it for the chat. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Of course, I'll post all the links in the video description, and there's also a repository that'll be linked there. So I'll post all the links there as soon as the show ends. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a notification when that happens. If you have something that you'd like for me to talk about here, you can hit me up on Twitter or any of the other things. All of my contact info is in the video description, or you can tweet with the CNCN hashtag, and one of us will pick it up. If there's a tool that I mentioned today that you use, let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear that people are using the tools that I find and that I think are cool. And of course, if you liked what you saw today, please subscribe to the channel and click the little bell to get notifications when the next show starts. I'll be here every weekday for as long as there's something to talk about. And there's always something to talk about. So thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Keep learning.